14 days or from 21 days up to 2 months. In the group that received placebo, 200 people got COVID. In the group that received vaccine, which was also 21,686 or 669, 10 people got COVID. And that's where they come out with a statement of it being 95% effective in preventing COVID. It actually seems to be even more effective than that in preventing severe COVID. So it is a very effective vaccine. Those figures have now been extended up to 6 months, and you're still seeing the huge improvement in the decreased number of people with COVID up to 6 months. We believe that the vaccine is going to last for at least a year, but it hasn't been around for long enough to be absolutely certain of that. The next slide shows the commonest side effects, and people who get the vaccine, a significant number do get a sore arm. And when I say a significant number, it's about 51% will complain of mild pain in the arm, 31% moderate, only 1% severe pain in the arm. Also, you can get redness and some swelling in the arm. Usually lasts for a day. It's a little worse than flu vaccine, but it's very rare that someone will actually be terribly upset with it. If you compare that with placebo, on the placebo with moderate, it's 1% versus 31% for severe, for moderate pain in the arm. As I say, it's about the same, or it's a little worse than the flu vaccine, but most people say it's nothing in comparison to COVID. It is nothing. There are a significant number of people will get headaches, aches and pains the next day. About between 2 and 5% will take the next day off. With a vaccination, are we going to be saying goodbye to COVID? And the answer to that is not immediately. To get herd immunity with the vaccine, we need at least 60% and possibly 90% of the population immunized with it. If we achieve 90% vaccination worldwide, essentially we will see the end of COVID. Realistically, I don't think we're going to see that. So I think COVID is going to be around for a period of time to come. If you look at, sorry, that.
I'll skip that.
Yeah, that, if you look in America, there's been, since vaccination's been rolled out, which also really coincided with Biden being elected president, there's been a marked decrease in the number of cases and hospitalizations, but it's plateauing off at the moment. And that's a reflection that there is not 60% vaccination, and there's been a loosening in social restrictions recently in America. I don't know if you saw Florida with spring break, but there were hundreds of young people dancing in the street and partying. So the vaccine isn't a silver bullet in that it won't get rid of COVID immediately, but it will decrease the severity. It will also decrease the total number of people who get hospitalized and get admitted. Will I get been invited to get vaccinated next week, which I've accepted, and the question is, why am I accepting to get vaccinated? I believe that the risk of the vaccine to me is far, far lower than the risk of COVID to me in Gisborne. And I know the risk in Gisborne is very small now, but we will open our borders up. And I do believe that at some time in the future, we'll have another case of COVID in our community as the borders open up. If I did get COVID, I don't want to spread it to someone else. I work with a lot of vulnerable people and I don't want to spread it to them. I think there's good, clear evidence that healthcare workers who have been vaccinated are at markedly reduced risk of spreading it. I also don't want to spread it to my family, in particular my grandkids, because I care about them. My kids I don't care about, but that's beside the point. I'm sick of lockdowns. Until we get really good vaccination, I think we're going to continue to see lockdowns in New Zealand. I think that they will be that's a political decision, but I just believe that it's likely to happen until we get a very good uptake of the vaccine. And I also would like to be able to travel overseas in the next few years. I've got a daughter in Australia. We're opening a travel bubble up with Australia. I actually think that in the future, it is quite likely you'll only be able to travel overseas to countries if you can produce a COVID vaccination certificate. And you may or may not have to have had a recent COVID swab as well. In New Zealand, I think we've been incredibly lucky or well managed, whatever you want to call it. And I don't think we really realize how severe COVID is overseas. Over 3 million people have died from it now worldwide. It's peaking in India at the moment. It's not over there. It is still a very active disease overseas. So it's not a disease that we can ignore. I think closing our borders for another 5 years and pretending to ignore it is not going to work either. So those are my comments on why I'd like to be vaccinated. Who shouldn't be vaccinated? Under the age of 16, there isn't good evidence. There are trials coming out and they're all looking very positive, but it's not registered for people under the age of 16. The advice with pregnant women is to talk to your health professional, which is cop out. The trials deliberately excluded pregnant women. Several women who were in the trials either were pregnant or got pregnant whilst on the trial, because it was a very large trial. And there has been no documented harm done with the vaccine. They are looking at it. There does not appear to be harm. My understanding is the advice really is that first trimester probably avoid it, second and third trimester get vaccinated. COVID in pregnant women is more severe than in age-adjusted women. In other words, it's more severe than in young women. But as we know, the older you are, the more likely you are to have a severe illness with COVID. The other group that I wouldn't give it to are the terminally unwell group of people. If someone's got a matter of a few weeks to live, I don't think they should be vaccinated. And that's because their risk is so small in that short period of time. And it's an uncomfortable vaccine. But that's a very small percentage of people. And I think that was all that I had to say.
Thanks, Chris. I'm just going to stop sharing, and you can perhaps see my screen behind me, which you've got there. These are actually the data of adverse reactions to the first dose and the second dose in blue from the US. This is not from the studies, but this is from actually the real world. Had over 1 million people who have reported using this vSafe app in the US. And you can see there from the back there that you do actually quite get these systemic symptoms of fatigue, headache, muscle pain, particularly after the second time. But as emphasized by Chris, for most people, these are relatively minor. Our experience to date of the people here is that we haven't heard people having particularly worse reactions after the second dose. Personally, I had pretty much the same reaction after the second dose as the first, and that's been the common reaction. But some people do get a more severe reaction. That's just something you have to accept, and that's just part of the immune response. But for most people, it's not an issue any more than with any other vaccine. Look, the purpose of this session was really for an opportunity to ask, for you guys to ask questions. So I'm gonna see if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will ask myself the questions, or maybe I'll ask Chris. We also have so yeah, please feel free either in the chat function or just unmute yourself if you have any questions or concerns, or if you've heard anything in the community today. I noticed today we had a bit of an issue with one of our board members questioning the approval based on some misinformation that's being put out by the New Zealand Outdoors Party. So there's this kind of stuff that happens because it's a special approval. But to suggest that there's anything, I think one of the concerns is that because of the speed, and I think it is a miracle of modern technology that less than a year after we identify a virus, we have the vaccine. And I think I just checked today, we have had 700 million doses of this vaccine given, and really with no safety concerns apart from the anaphylaxis, which you well know, and this question about this rare clotting risk, especially in younger people with the AstraZeneca vaccine. But so far we've had this extensive use, we had these well-conducted large trials, so we have good data. And as somebody has said, even though this is a new vaccine, we've actually got more real-world experience of this vaccine than an HPV vaccine, but obviously because of the target population and the scale it's rolled out. I'm not seeing any hands up or any questions, or unmuting yourselves for questions. Yes, please.
Oh, kia ora Oz. I'm Ara here from District Nursing. I just wanted to know, I was reading today, and I know this is all part of the processes that go on when you get it from newspapers and radio. Has vomiting been part of one of the effects of the vaccine?
Not prominently. It's more tends to be like fatigue, headache, body aches, joint pains, those sorts of things. But nausea is just a common symptom to anything, and I'm sure Chris is probably better placed to comment on that one.
Thank you.
But no, not been a problem. Chris, have you seen any concerns about nausea? Because I haven't seen that a major feature, but it's just one of the symptoms.
I've heard of a few people who've had some nausea, and I've heard of a few people who have had a little bit of vomiting, sort of like a hangover, not profuse vomiting, but just a little bit of an upchuck with it, possibly related to headache. All gone within 24 hours. All gone within 24 hours. But
the common experience with side effects is it's usually the next day, and it usually lasts a day, or so, usually lasts a day or less. But occasionally, some people do get it more severely occasionally, and it does last a bit longer for some people. But that's a more common pattern of reactions.
Thank you.
The other side effect that occurs in about 3 or 4% is people develop lymphadenopathy, which usually comes on about day 3 or 4, can last for a week or two. Usually painless, but people notice the swelling there. If you're due for a mammogram, it's worthwhile getting that delayed for about 3 or 4 weeks after the COVID. That's not because of, it's because the mammogram may pick up a little bit of lymphadenopathy due to the vaccination rather than any other concern with that, and give a false positive or a false reading in the mammogram. Delaying the mammogram for a few weeks will do no harm at all.
Wondering if you've heard of any things going on in the chatter in the community about things which don't sound quite right about the vaccine, or straight out conspiracy theories around it, or
Sorry, it's Leanne from NASC.
yeah.
Wondering, I myself are allergic to a lot of antibiotics. How does it affect people who are allergic to antibiotics?
It's a specific allergy. We believe it's related to what they call the lipid nanoparticles. It's really the fatty envelope that the vaccine, which is just an mRNA molecule, gets in there, and it's allergic to this antifreeze polyethylene glycol. No, that's not right. Anyway, it's a fatty thing. So if you're allergic to something else, doesn't mean you're going to be reacting to this one. But if you do have allergies, particularly the kind of serious anaphylactic reactions, those are the people where we might want to keep you in for just a bit longer than the 20 minutes, just to make sure you're not having a reaction. But otherwise, being allergic to other things is not a reason to have the vaccine. But having a serious allergic reaction to the vaccine or its constituent would be a reason not to have the vaccine.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we had quite a few people, particularly in the tier 1 with the port, who had various different allergies. We didn't have any problems with any of them, different kinds of allergies to different things. That they asked me about them because we were just checking them all, and but they were all just fine.
Cool, thank you.
Bearing in mind, the risk of the anaphylaxis is estimated from the US as being 1 in 200,000 or 5 per million. So it's, we'd have to vaccinate on average, we'd have to vaccinate everybody in Tairafti twice to see one. Sorry, 4 times, because we've got a population of 50,000, right?
The CDC says if you have an anaphylactic reaction to flu vaccine, you're safe to have the COVID vaccine. There isn't cross-reaction with any of the antibiotics. As Oz says, it's believed to be one of the constituents in it, which is polyethylene glycol. Which is a very rare thing to have an allergy to. If someone did have an anaphylaxis to the first dose, the advice is not to get the second dose. There are actually ways to get around that, which are being actively explored. One of the other vaccines, the Johnson & Johnson, doesn't have the polyethylene glycol. It has its own other problems. And people have also talked about using repeated low doses on the second time. And that's been done with people who've had anaphylaxis to it. So it is, there are mechanisms around it, but allergy to multiple antibiotics isn't a reason not to get it. That's a group that I would keep an eye on for the 30 minutes after the injection. And I think everyone is held there for 30 minutes in New Zealand. In America, it's only for 20 minutes.
So I just got a question from Chris. When you have your first injection, does the second injection have to be 21 days after, or can it be pushed out a bit further?
It can be pushed out. 21 days is the minimum period of time. Certainly pushing it out for another few days is very acceptable. There is some suggestion that you may be better off to get it after a more prolonged period, but the trial was done with the injections done at 21 days, and that's where we know that's effective. I have a suspicion that actually delaying it for a little bit longer might be a better idea, but I haven't got proof of that, and I'm not advocating it.
No, I mean, generally, as with all vaccines, we don't need to restart, because it's all about building your immune memory, and the memory stays. And generally, as Chris says, the longer the gap, the more we'd expect, but we don't have the data. The other point about this, which is I think very relevant right now, is that we know that one dose doesn't give you as good a protection as two doses, both in terms of the level of antibodies, but also like in the duration of protection. And that's particularly important, I think, for some of the variants, because the the first variant of concern, which was first identified in the UK, also called the Kent variant or the B117, that one shows just a little bit of antigenic escape. In other words, it's changed a bit so that the antibodies to previous infection or to the vaccine doesn't work so well, but it's a very small, it's hard to say any difference. And we have good real world experience of this in Israel and the UK, where the vaccine has been able to deal with this fine and address the B117 curves there. The other two variants of concern, which were identified from Brazil and South Africa, are showing potentially more vaccine escape, but the laboratory data suggesting, again, good protection with the vaccine. We don't yet have real world evidence of that. But again, the need for the two doses is because one dose doesn't give you as good protection as sorry. I mean, obviously one dose would be ideal, but you need the two doses to really get that full 90% plus protection.
Cool, thank you.
I've got a message here from I don't know who's on the iPhone, but somebody in there. What is the message to give to the community who are anxious when it is their turn to be vaccinated? I'm not quite sure what the question is there, but we're doing a national rollout, and we're following the national rollout. The tier 1 was the border workers, which for us was the port workers, and tier 2A is going to be the frontline health workers. Tier 2B is going to be those older people, people at increased risk, particularly like the ARC, people in ARC. I think South Auckland is there. And then we're going to be going on to the other at-risk people and then the general population. So the question of exactly when it's going to be is going to be dependent a little bit on the rollout, but we're just talking about May, probably more likely June for the general population. That's going to be their turn to be vaccinated. And I think one of the questions here is really about how we saw in our communities really trying to protect their community with the road checks around, particularly around the East Coast, when the COVID first came in. And it's really just kind of that proactive action for communities to really make sure that they are protected, bearing in mind that while it's an individual action to get vaccinated, vaccination works as a population intervention by preventing the spread of disease in the community. I'm not sure if I answered your question about the general public who are anxious when it's their turn. It's about when it's going to be their turn. I think some more precise dates are going to be done, and that's going to be kind of based on a locality, and details they haven't been fully detailed because right now we're just doing it stage by stage and focusing on the frontline health workers.
I agree with what Oz says. Essentially, people who are reluctant to it's people's right to decline to be vaccinated, but listening to their concerns and answering as honestly as you possibly can. A lot of there is a concern, is this vaccine safe? The answer to that I would have is it's been given to millions of people now without a major risk. Will we have a better vaccine in 5 years' time? If the disease is around in 5 years' time, we probably will have a better vaccine, but that's 5 years of being at risk. We will have more information in 5 years, but that's 5 years of being at risk and of putting the rest of the community at risk. I'm quite serious. It's not just total selfishness that I want the vaccine. I don't want COVID, but I really don't want to pass it on to more vulnerable people in the community.
One way, I mean, I kind of touched on the fact that some people are still seeing this as experimental or not having gone through the proper safety thing, which is just simply not true. As I said, because it went through all of the procedures, everything was accelerated for various reasons. I think going back, you could see the Chris's first graph showing that the difference between the cases in the placebo and the vaccine group, because there was a lot of disease in the countries where they did the trials of, they were able to get that difference sooner. That was one of the reasons for the faster trial. but it is, you know, it's been widely used. I believe Pfizer vaccine is being used in somewhere between 70 and 80 countries globally. You know, Israel was the kind of poster child as having had the most COVID vaccine, but I think right now in America, they're giving over 1 million doses a day just of the COVID, just of the Pfizer vaccine. I think it's like 3 million doses altogether. And all of this is being done with careful, you know, monitoring of side effects. So we said we have, you know, and that's one example of that is the concerns about clotting having been identified with the AstraZeneca vaccine. Seems like a very rare. So the WHO Safety Committee issued a statement saying it's plausible, but it's not clear if it is actually definitely linked, but it certainly may be a risk that we're there. But even if it is definitely a risk, that risk, which is ballpark 1 in a million, you know, that sort of level, compared to the huge risks that you get from COVID, is clearly doesn't, you know, although it does materially alter the balance, because now we do have a potential safety concern. And say, again, I've just emphasized that's with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, not with the Pfizer one, although it could be possibly with that one too. We haven't seen any signal of that. The benefits, you know, there's still that small risk doesn't change the overwhelming balance of benefit versus risks, as Chris pointed out. But the other thing to mention, I think, which may be a concern, I'm just chatting because I'm not getting any questions, is the whole issue of RNA and affecting the genetic code. Because it's quite a new, this is brand new, the Pfizer vaccine is a brand new vaccine technology. You may realize the very first vaccine we used was the given to us by nature, because Jenner in 1796 showed that if you gave cowpox, which is a natural infection of cows, to a young boy, he was then protected from smallpox. And that's why we have the word vaccine is used, because derived from cows. So that one was just given to us by nature. Then Pasteur in the 19th century developed various vaccines by killing the virus. Then more recently with hepatitis B and also with HPV, we're now just getting very sophisticated and just providing not the whole bug, but just one portion, the protein of it. And now this is the next phase. Rather than giving you the protein, which will help your immune system recognize it, we give the instructions to make the protein to your cell, and it makes that protein. And this is working really well, and it's probably working really well because it's very similar to the biological process of what happens when you get a virus infection, which is that the virus will take over your cells and make that protein. Now, the difference between the vaccine and the virus is the vaccine is just making a single protein, that spike protein, whereas the virus needs 29 different proteins to become a functional virus. So there's no infection risk, but you get all of that benefit of exposure and teaching your immune system. Good.
I've got a question.
Please.
Sorry, it might have been answered before because I joined a little bit late, but how did the government choose the Pfizer vaccine, or why?
Yeah, well, I can't, I'm not privy to all of the discussions, but I think very early on, I think the government made a bet on 4 of the 5 leading contenders, one of which was Pfizer. And when data came out that really the mRNA vaccines do seem to be performing best, I think that was probably the decision. They didn't want, I think part of the, I don't have any basis, and I think we're kind of seeing this in Europe. They didn't want to have this feeling that some people got the better vaccine and other people got the second best. Although personally, I quite like the 1-dose vaccine, but in terms of it doesn't have the same bottom line efficacy. Sorry, I'm just seeing another question here. Those under 16 with respiratory infections, etc. Yeah, well, I mean, I think the vaccine will be licensed for those under 16, as you say, the data is emerging, but right now it's just simply not licensed. So children, I mean, luckily children do seem to be less likely to get the disease and less likely to spread it, which is part of the reason why they're focused on adults first. But I think they're an important consideration, especially for the high school children, to get that. Yeah, so I think the advice now is we're still focusing on keeping the virus out with the additional vaccine, as well as everything else we're doing. But I think everything's going to change once we open the border, assuming that's happening. And I think that one is contingent on the other. As I understand, there's a task force being established, and one of the questions is at what level of vaccine coverage can we safely open the border? which I think is a bit of an impossible question to answer. But anyway, well, you know, it'll be a best guess. So yeah, so I'm just saying, like, I'm just looking because I think somebody had sent me a couple of questions by email, and one of it was around a pregnancy, and I think Chris has touched on the issues of that really, and I think it's really just more the lack of controlled data. But actually, there is a lot of data showing it is safe in pregnancy, including, you know, people who were in the trial and didn't realize it, and now they're also actively following them up in the States as another, similar to the system I showed there was showing the adverse effect. The CDC is actively following up the pregnancy outcomes of those who are getting vaccinated. And again, no signals and no real concerns about it. And yes, I would have no hesitation, but the advice is, because it wasn't included in the trial, to discuss with your GP. But there's no reason not to have it, just because we're obviously extra concerned about anything that might affect the unborn child. Looking for space. Another question here. No. No.
If it was my daughter who was pregnant, my advice to her would be not to get the vaccine in the first trimester, but get it in the second or third. If she was living in America or living in India or living in England, I'd actually advise her to get it in the first trimester, because there is a real potential risk if living there. New Zealand, the risk is incredibly small, and that's why I take the precaution of avoiding it in the first trimester.
Yeah, I mean, we have the luxury that, you know, we're not balancing actual disease risk at the moment, but we know it's going to come, and we don't know when it's going to come. This nature of the virus.
One of my big fears in New Zealand is people. To me, COVID has been an inconvenience. I've hated having the lockdown. Well, I've not enjoyed having the lockdowns, but we haven't seen the effect that it had. And if COVID had hit New Zealand like it hit Italy when it first happened, we would have had 6 people on a ventilator within a week. The whole of the medical floor would have been filled with patients with COVID. It's really difficult to imagine it is a very, very serious illness if it gets out of control.
The other serious aspect of it, which not everybody's fully understanding, and I'm still trying to grapple the extent of it, is what we're calling long COVID. People who have persisting symptoms, and some of them surprisingly also not necessarily start off with a severe illness. In fact, some of them don't even have much of an illness at first. But it's just, again, this is what it's just not playing well with some of our immune systems, I guess. But this is quite worrying. You know, that some of the surveys they do of people who've been in hospital, and they're there, and they chase them up after 6-7 months, and there are a lot of people with a lot of symptoms afterwards. I'm not talking, you know, I thought 10% was high, but I've seen surveys with 30%, 50%, even 70%, depending on what exactly you're looking for. Chris, I don't know if you have any your sense of how common this I mean, again, long COVID probably represents more than one thing. It's a whole range of different aspects.
Yeah, I think, again, I think a lot of it's psychological. I'm not being critical of that. A lot of it is actually very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. And again, that's a sign of how distressing the illness is to people. It is a terrifying illness to get. In that a significant number of people are afraid they're going to die if you get it. If you've been vaccinated, your probability of dying is very, very small.
No more questions? No more? Any other interesting stories that you're hearing out there about the vaccine or the conspiracies?
I've seen quite a few interesting effects of the vaccine that are reported and one-off cases when they've been looked at. And if you do see that, like you will see some people who've died within a few hours of being vaccinated. And then you actually read into it and you find they were 95-year-old people in long-term rest home care that were really had multiple comorbidities, and basically they were at risk of dying any time over the last several months, almost certainly not related to the vaccine. All of those cases are being reviewed in depth. There was the shaking woman that was on the internet who had terrible tremors. That she has subsequently been fully neurologically assessed, and there is a strong belief that this is not related to the vaccine at all, or not related to a physical effect of the vaccine. And you don't go blue and explode too, which is something else I've heard.
Good. So in terms of the process of the vaccination, I hope that's fairly clear. What the process is going to be. One of the challenges with the vaccine is the ultra cold chain, and it comes in multi-dose vials, and obviously every dose is precious in the current global situation. So unlike the flu vaccination where people pop down, people will be offered to come at a particular time. If that doesn't suit, then another time will be found. Rather than just popping down to the centre. And the step to initiate that process was really completing the consent form and sending it to Kathy Brown. Is there any questions about the vaccination process? And it's going to be starting even on Monday. I think we're going to have one, I think it's Thursday late night and a Saturday as well. So it's not just 9 to 5. Yeah. Good.
The invites are going out at the moment. I got invited today. If you haven't put in your consent form, you still can put those in now. I don't know what the uptake has been like throughout the hospital.
I understand at this stage we have good uptake and most people are getting their forms in. So fingers crossed we will have plenty of vaccinated people in our organisation.
And anyone who doesn't get it gets shot.
We've been, I've got mine on Monday, my first shot, and district nurses have been invited. So it's really quite good to see that it's occurring now for our frontline workers.
And I think as soon as we've done the frontline workers and stuff, we need to accelerate, obviously, to reach our community in ways that meet their needs as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think part of that as well, I think, is making sure that all of that our health staff, obviously key for the community, have those questions and also have the experience as well from there. I have asked them, just to kind of think is, I have asked them the GPs on to let me know of any adverse reactions, because I hear about them and then I follow up. I haven't, and I have found one person who has had they have called it COVID arm, where you get a reaction in the second week, the same sort of reaction the first week, the second week just kind of drags on a little bit. Has been reported overseas, and again, just settles down. It's just not, some people, say for most people, you won't hardly notice it, or it'll notice it and it'll be gone for a day. But there is some people do get it more severely, but it's still a passing. It's still, even at that higher cost, if you like, it's still a good price, I think, to pay for prevention against a very severe disease. Okay. If there are no more questions, is there any? Susan, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that if anyone does come up with questions that
Oh, I can't hear you, Susan. Your headset.
Might be my computer.
Oh no, that's better now. Yeah, it might just be the internet.
Yeah. Just if anyone does come up with questions or there's questions in your department that that any of the three of us are happy to answer them at any time, either via email or yeah, if you've got a question for Chris or Oz and you want to email them to me, I can always get hold of them and ask the questions and get that.
Yeah.
And that, yeah.
Good. All right. Any last words from you, Chris? Oh, you're on mute.
No. I mean, I'm actually looking forward to getting vaccinated, and that's not because I'm a masochist. It's something that I have to do. I know that. I want to get it over and done with and then get on and forget about it.
And that's my experience. You get vaccinated and then you carry on with your life. And hopefully it allows us a new, to open up with the world again when enough of us got vaccinated.
It'll be interesting to see further down the track, like what the uptake is from younger people, because I know with my own adult children, they're much more worried about the conspiracy theories and things than like my generation or my parents' generation, where we're more concerned about passing it on or getting it ourselves.
Yeah. I love the one about the 5G chips in the vaccine or whatever, especially as we know that they're already tracking you.
The younger generation never seem to mind carrying a mobile phone and playing on it 24/7. So it's fascinating they care about a vaccine.
So it reminds me of my favorite cartoons. It's like you've been eating hot dogs all your life and you want to know what's in the vaccine. Okay. Well, good. And I say, look, please, if you have any more questions, you know how to get hold of any of us. Happy to answer it. I think there is I'm not sure what happened to it because I just jumped. There's the questions and answer booklet as always that's also coming out. But please, if you have any new questions or if you hear any conspiracies or anything, please just do let us know. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.